Prepare for launch in 3, 2, 1.
On September 20th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire when a bright light came out of the sky. 2 hours later, they were back in their driveway with no memory of what happened or where they'd been. According to their reports, the couple had traveled to Zeta, a star system 39 light years from Earth. Betty was even unexpectedly able to draw an accurate, detailed map of the sky as seen from that star. This was the first noteworthy alien abduction story in modern history. Their tale captivated a nation that had scarcely heard anything like it before. In the years that followed, countless other tales of alien and UFO abductions emerged, each containing new details of otherworldly creatures. In 1971, there was the incident which allegedly saw two fishermen taken from a riverbank in Mississippi and held captive aboard an alien ship. Then, in 1978, there was the Travis Walton abduction, during which a Texas man vanished for 5 whole days. While there has yet to be any proof that these first-hand accounts are real, the stories below are certainly detailed enough to cause chills. Barney and Betty Hill took a spontaneous trip to the White Mountains of New Hampshire in September 1961, as he recounted in John G. Fuller's The Interrupted Journey from 1966. Barney needed a break from his night shift at the post office, while Betty was mentally exhausted from handling state child welfare cases. On the last night of their makeshift honeymoon, the two found themselves in a Vermont diner, ready to make the last dash home to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, by leaving at 10 p.m. They planned on arriving home by around 2 a.m. On the road, Betty noticed a particularly bright star, perhaps a planet in the sky. When the object began changing its course in an erratic manner, Betty was convinced it was a UFO. Her husband was not. "Barney," she said, "if you think that's a satellite or a star, you're being completely ridiculous." As the object drew closer, Barney pulled the car to a stop and, gun in hand, got out to investigate. As he approached the object, Barney saw what he would later describe as a pancake-like disc glowing with brilliant white light that was about the size of a jet. Fleeing back to his car, he and Betty tried to evade the vessel, but were instead overcome with intense drowsiness and immediately fell unconscious. The couple pulled into their driveway around dawn, unable to recall what had happened. 2 hours of memory seemed to have wiped from both their minds. While Betty was convinced they had encountered a UFO and later reported the sighting to the Air Force, her husband was skeptical. It was only when the couple met with psychiatrist Dr. Benjamin Simon for a consultation in December 1963 that Barney changed his mind. Dr. Simon found both to be suffering from crippling anxiety. Betty, in particular, manifested hers in the form of repetitive nightmare dreams. Dr. Simon then put them under hypnosis, which reportedly yielded highly anonymous memories. Barney Hill recalled creatures with slanted eyes taking the couple abroad, their UFO to conduct experiments on their naked bodies. Barney claimed that the beings took samples of their hair, skin, and nail clippings, and then a 6-inch long needle was inserted into Betty's stomach. Betty told Dr. Simon that she later asked a being they knew to be the leader where they were. It jokingly replied, "If you don't know where you are, there wouldn't be any point in telling you where I am." During another hypnosis session in 1964, Betty drew a star map of the sky from memory as seen from a planet orbiting the star Zeta. Most shocking above all was that this map was drawn with confounding accuracy and that Zeta lies some 40 light years from Earth. Betty's nearly spot-on recreation of the stars surrounding an actual star system remains one of the most intriguing aspects of all alien stories ever reported. Barney and Betty Hill's account led the Air Force to launch Project Blue Book. That aimed to investigate domestic UFO sightings and also presented a template for all the UFO abduction stories that fall in the decades to come. When numerous residents of Berkshire County, Massachusetts individually reported having seen a UFO on September 1st, 1969, authorities were at a loss for an explanation. This wasn't a lone sighting that could be easily dismissed. It truly appeared, though, something uncanny had occurred. On the evening in question, residents spotted lights above Sheffield. In the southern Berkshires, many of the witnesses said that the lights were fitted to an unidentified disc-shaped craft that was maneuvering in ways some witnesses could not explain. Some witnesses claimed that they lost track of time as they gazed with stunned fascination at the object. Thomas Reed was 9 years old at the time, in the car with his mother, brother, and grandmother that night. The family noticed a group of glowing orbs dash out of the roadside trees. Reed claims that something astounding happened when heading home. His family approached Sheffield Bridge. It came to a stop off the right side of the road. He recalled of the glowing orbs. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. There was a huge change in pressure. It was just like a dead silence. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud. And that was it. Then the family suddenly found itself back in the car, but they had unexpectedly lost 2 hours of memory. Stranger, Stell Reed's mother and grandmother had somehow switched car seats. Despite any tangible evidence of the Berkshire's UFO incident, Reed has remained steadfast in his account. He said over time, the family regained some memory of the incident, including having been a hangar-like facility with other people. "We encountered something," said Reed. "It was definitely not of this world. This hangar thing we were in was huge. It was larger than a football field. This hallway we had seen was circular with a Y configuration, almost to control the flow of traffic. This one room had a bowed-in wall that was rounded." It's important to remember that Reed was only one of the dozens of people who reported witnessing a UFO in the Sheffield area that night. Some were adults who called into the local radio station to report the sighting. Others were children who began drawing UFOs in class. There must have been 20 to 30 sketches that were drawn by children in our 4th grade class from what they saw, said Reed. They hung underneath in the class board in Sheffield Center School. More than one of those hang in the Roswell Museum today. People don't realize the significance of this, and so it wasn't just us. On November 5th, 1975, Travis Walton was reportedly abducted and didn't return for 5 whole days. When he did, he had quite the explanation for his disappearance. Dismissed as mentally unstable, liar, Walton chronicled his alleged alien stories in the Walton Experience 3 years later, which was adapted into the science fiction classic Fire in the Sky. Walton's abduction began after a long day's work in the National Forest near Herbert, Arizona. Walton and his 6-man group of loggers were returning home when they allegedly spotted a shiny disc spanning 40 feet in diameter hovering in the sky above them. It was a metallic glowing disc making some very strange sounds, he recalled. The closer I got to it, the more scared we all got, and they were swearing at me to get away from there. And when I got up close, it suddenly got louder and started to move. Walton then claimed that non-human beings abducted him and experimented on him until he fought them off. He has maintained this claim for 45 years, but as the beings reportedly poked and probed at him on a kind of table, 5 days elapsed on Earth where Walton was officially declared missing and his co-workers became suspects. I became consciousness inside the craft, and I believed I was in a hospital, said Walton. I was in a lot of pain, and as I became more conscious, I looked around and saw alien beings and I just panicked. They were much smaller than me, and I think that's the reason they gave up. He said, adding that he hit one of them. Once they found out they couldn't control me, they split. I was absolutely terrified. Meanwhile, Walton's colleagues were questioned by authorities, and when Walton miraculously appeared, a full-scale investigation was launched that included polygraphs, psychological evaluations, and physical examinations. For 5 days, the authorities thought that he'd been murdered by his co-workers, and then he was returned, said UFOologist Jim Lind. All of the co-workers who were there, who saw the spacecraft, they all took a polygraph test and they all passed, except for one, and that one was inclusive. In the end, the Walton case remains as an unconclusive, as all of these alien abduction stories do. Curiously, however, later research conducted at the site of Walton's abduction, usual growth rate in the trees where the craft had allegedly hovered. The trees near the site were found to be producing wood fiber at a rate 36 times greater than they had decades before. Audrey and Debbie Hewins not only claim that aliens exist, but that alien abductions do too, and they've experienced them. I was probably about 5 years old or so, said Audrey, and a bright blue light would come into the room, and the door would open, and there would be like a foggy kind of misty blue light just shining through the whole house, and these two figures would come in. Though Audrey's first alien abduction allegedly occurred during childhood, she claimed these visitations continued well into adulthood. We have been together on abductions, stated Audrey. We have been up and seen our house from above, so we realized they are not from here. They are very good at mind erasing, or whatever you want to call it. They'll leave you with bits and pieces of things you can't remember. Debbie added, I remember one time being on a spaceship and standing there on the spaceship and the floor, and the walls disappeared, and I was staring at the earth. Though the twins refer to these entities as the bald men, what they've described to people willing to listen closely resembles what UFOologists have dubbed alien greys or simple greys. Greys are alleged to be a type of extraterrestrial being that is human-like in form, gray-colored and with an enlarged hairless head. The twins said that they pleaded with their parents not to put them to bed for fear of encountering the bald men, but the adults simply dismissed that these alien stories as a ruse to stay up longer. They started doing all kinds of experiments on us when we were 12, said Audrey. While she was initially hesitant to come forward, Audrey claimed that after a non-human entity saved her from drowning in the ocean, she was inspired to dedicate her life to openly discussing her alien abduction experiences. Robert Davis, who was one of the first professionals to lend his support to the twins, explained that Audrey and Debbie Hewins' experience are shared by many thousands, if not millions, worldwide. It's unreasonable to think that they would all be lying or report in dreams and fantasies, he said. These events are constantly reported and should be taken seriously by everyone despite of its uniqueness. As a former United States Marine, Terrell Copeland isn't easily dismissed as an unreliable observer, and so his alien stories are perhaps harder to shake. Copeland claimed that his first experience with aliens occurred in 2007 when he captured footage of what he believed to be a UFO on his cell phone from his apartment in Suffolk, Virginia. It was an orb of light, he said, just a big ball of light. It wasn't moving. One was solid white. The other was directly across the street from it, up to 300 feet above the ground, and was changing colors very rapidly. Copeland recalled feeling as though something was wrong and that he wasn't supposed to be witnessing the unnerving aerial experience, but he alleged that it wasn't until after he published the footage online that things truly became strange. I woke up from a nap by the sound of someone trying to enter my apartment, he said, and I said, "Who is it?" There was no answer. You could just see the doorknob moving and like a scratching at the door. And I keep a firearm. It was on my table, and my thought was to get up and check. Despite the urge to get up, Copeland was paralyzed and only able to move his eyes. Suddenly, purportedly, heard a voice through the door tell him, "You don't need that weapon. We won't harm." The incident certainly resembled the natural phenomenon known as sleep paralysis, which is experienced by many, but Copeland soon began to experience missing hours as well. He was incapable of accounting for 4 waking hours during a span of 2 nights. When you see these objects, and then you do the research and you see that there are so many people who have experienced the same thing as you, he said, you have to say to yourself, maybe there is something to this. Copeland claimed that as soon as he started to keep a log of notes and sketches, his memory of what had happened during his episodes of missing time began to resurface. I was in a room and I saw a woman who did not have complete human features, he said. She had the typical black eyes that you hear about. She had a weird skull and that startled me. And the next memory I have is me standing on my balcony waving at the cylinder-shaped ship. Copeland's alien stories, which were eventually chronicled on the History Channel, remain both startling and unproven, as all alien abduction tales do. In the end, however, Copeland said that his experience was for the best and has left him with a desire to be a better person. I feel if someone from above took notice of me, then maybe I'm doing something right. And if I'm doing something right, maybe I could do it better.